The crime that happened in India is not the same as the Holocaust, but the disinformation techniques to deny it, they are quite similar. But first we have to mention another another difference. There is no risk involved. You see, if you practice negationism regarding the Holocaust, you bring a certain sacrifice. You see that has social consequences. In India, denying what happened to Hindus also has consequences, but only positive ones. You know, you suddenly are part of the so-called secularist class, which is those who downplay their Hindu origins, if they have those, or any other party that is against Hindus, like, for instance, Muslim fundamentalists or Christian missionaries or so. In India, they all call themselves secularists. You see, in India, the word secularist has a different meaning from what it used to have in the West. So anyway, that class, you see, looks after itself quite well, is also looked after quite well by the present day BJP government, you see, which outside propaganda says you're Hindu, fanatical and so on. There's nothing to it. They continue Congress policies in this regard. Their minister Jadavekar, who was responsible for the school textbooks, said in 2018, after the BJP had been in power for 4 years, "Oh, we are proud that in these 4 years we have not changed one line in the textbooks." And so till now it hasn't happened. So, so there is no risk involved in practicing history denial, at least if it is this kind of history denial. And we will see why. So this has been an official policy already started on a small scale by the first education minister, Maulana Azad. Maulana Azad was not just anyone. In the 20s, he was a leader of the Khilafat movement. And so he gave a fatwa that British India was an infidel state and that Muslims should either leave it, so that thousands of families sold everything, fled to Afghanistan, and saw in desperation that they weren't waited for, they weren't welcome, and they came back to India. Or, you see, Muslims should flee, or they should wage jihad against this regime. So, you know, this was a factor in the Mopla riots. There was a wave of violence in South India that was ostensibly against the British regime. But you see, for a bunch of amateurs to take on a professional army, that's perhaps asking for too much. So they redirected their aggression to their Hindu neighbors. So there's Maulana Azad for you. Now, because when the partition became a talking point, he was on the side of those who opposed partition, together with Congress, together with Gandhi and Nehru and so on. He's portrayed as a good guy. But in fact, what he wanted was to Islamize all of India in the long run. But so he was careful, he was strategic about it. So he said the thing now to do is to keep India together and then gather as much power as we can have in the present setup, which was a lot, because Mahatma Gandhi was even willing to make the Muslim League, the party that was in favor of partition, to make that the government for all of India in order to prevent them from pursuing partition, right? So Muslim power would have been greatly, well, overdone, overrepresented in a united India. Anyway, so he was rewarded for his support to Congress after independence with the job of education minister. Then later, when Nehru's daughter Indira Gandhi became the prime minister, then it really took off, mainly through the action of her secretary P.N. Haksar and her education minister Nurul Hassan. This was in fact the result of a sort of power arrangement. She had an inner party power struggle inside the Congress party, so she needed some help from outside. She took help from the left, and the arrangement between them was, okay, you see, all the perks of office you can keep for yourself. You know, you can get the jobs and the appearances on TV and everything. We will have the real power, the cultural power. So from then on, you see, the left takes control over the educational sector. So how was this justified to the Indian population? Well, first of all, of course, very many people never asked any questions about it. How often do you talk about the contents of the history school books? But those who did express concern for that, you know, they were given a certain kind of justification. Well, mostly what you have is the same as in Holocaust denial, namely wishful thinking. You see, few people justify to themselves, oh, I'm going to tell lies. You see, very many of the people concerned just have a certain rosy view of Islamic history in India and try to, you know, get that message through in the history textbooks. So they have this idealized view of Islam, this idealized view of Muhammad, of Akbar, of Mahmud Ghaznavi, and so on. So if there is anything negative to be said, it should be toned down as little as possible. So that's not just true among Indian Muslims, that is true among very, very, very many Hindus also. They don't like bad news. In the case of the Gandhians, of course, there's always this masochism, you know, this idea that if anything bad happens to us, it means we deserved it. And so there you have always the story, oh yeah, caste, yes. There's so much oppression within Hindu society, therefore it's only normal that such a thing happened to us. Among the hard left, you have also the mythic assumption popularized by M.N. Roy, the first president of the Communist Party, that Islam was welcomed in India by the masses, that they felt oppressed and so on, and that finally Islam came to change the system and that, you know, that they would welcome that. Well, that is thoroughly unhistorical.